All right, again, welcome everyone. This week we are going to hear a story of philanthropy and capitalism coming together in a really new and powerful way. A story of lives being changed not far from where we're sitting right now. It's a story of the Housing Impact Fund. It's a new approach to affordable housing. And part of this story is one of the first investments of Christ Church outreach funds from our Transforming Hearts Capital campaign. I don't think it will take much to convince you all that there is a significant shortage of affordable housing in and around Charlotte. There's some data on the screen that puts a point on it. The size of that shortage is a moving target, given that we have about 130 new people moving to Charlotte every day. But right now, a good working number is that we are short about 25,000 apartment rental units that can be described as affordable for the most vulnerable among us, those who are earning less than 30% of area median income. That shortage number is much larger if you start to look at 50% or 60% of area median income. There's no silver bullet that's going to fix this problem over the short haul or the long haul. It's going to take multiple approaches. But one of the newest and most impactful solutions is being offered by the Housing Impact Funds and its operating partner, Ascent Housing. No less an authority than Liz Clayson Kelly of Roof Above spoke at the Faith Forum earlier this year and told Chip that the Housing Impact Fund is the most innovative effort underway not only in Charlotte, but also across the country to address housing insecurity. We are really lucky to have with us the people who have made the Housing Impact Funds a reality. I'm going to do very brief introductions of our very familiar panelists. If I linger on any of them, we'd be here the rest of the hour for that. But let's hold our applause till I get everybody introduced. First, Erskine Bowles. Erskine has touched our city, our state, and our country in so many ways. Among them, he served as head of the Small Business Administration and as White House Chief of Staff for President Clinton. He was president of the University of North Carolina System for 5 years. He was co-chair of President Obama's Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform. And before all of that, he was a founder, along with 2 Christ Church parishioners, of Bowles, Hollowell, and Connor, which was the seedbed of the investment banking community in Charlotte. And he's Derek Close's brother-in-law. Mark Etheridge, holding the microphone, is the managing principal of Ascent Housing. Ascent helped create and serves as the operating partner for the Housing Impact Funds. Mark co-chaired the City of Charlotte's Source of Income Advisory Committee in 21-22 and has led several initiatives addressing housing insecurity in Charlotte. Mark is a graduate of Princeton and got married at Christ Church. Adelaide Martin leads the coordination of supportive services, housing programs, and operations for Ascent Housing. Adelaide has more than 15 years of experience in the nonprofit and social impact space. Prior to joining Ascent Housing, she was Chief Operating Officer for the United Way of Greater Charlotte. Adelaide's a graduate of Virginia and got her MBA from Duke. And Adelaide and Mark were classmates in middle school at Country Day. And Adelaide, Jake, and Lucy and Fletcher are Christ Church parishioners. Along with Erskine, Nelson Schwab is a co-founder of Carousel Capital here in Charlotte. Among many other things, Nelson has served as chair of the Board of Trustees of UNC Chapel Hill, as chair and CEO of Paramount Parks and Kings Entertainment Company, and as chair of the North Carolina Outward Bound School and the Blumenthal Center for the Performing Arts. He and Jane are Christ Church parishioners. Let's welcome our friends, please. All right, so we start with the proposition that we have a severe shortage of affordable housing in Charlotte. But before we get to the Housing Impact Fund itself and the steps it's taking, we need to get one definition in mind. And we need to talk about Noah, and not Noah as in the ark. Mark, will you set the stage for us and talk about what Noah is and why it's important?
Yeah, thank you, Doug, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. I did get married here, and I apologize for taking my wife away to the dark side of the Presbyterian denomination. We can't be more grateful for the support you all have given us, and we're so confident in the impact it's going to have. And so I really want everyone to leave today thinking or knowing that you're really transforming the lives of our residents through generosity. So thank you. Naturally occurring affordable housing, for us it means old apartment communities. But to give you a bigger sense, the vast majority, 82% of housing in this country that is affordable to low and moderate income households is privately owned, market rate, and unrestricted. So when most folks hear the word affordable housing, they think about a lot of things that the government may have its hands in, it's protected, it has restrictions or other encumbrances. And 82% of the time, that's not the case. It's just housing that might be a little bit older, might be a little bit worn down, might be in an area of disinvestment, and that brings the housing cost to a level that low and moderate income households can afford. And the problem that's been really acute in the last 15 years of this economic cycle is that housing stock has been extremely vulnerable to change. And that is one of the reasons that Housing Impact Fund exists.
Okay, Mark, talk about why NOAA communities are at risk in Charlotte and why preserving them is important.
We clearly have a huge supply and demand imbalance in the housing market, and despite all the activity and all the cranes that we have in Charlotte, we actually still underbuild housing year over year, and have done that, and that's been the case for 20 years. And so what that does is it creates a lot of pressure and creates a lot of demand, and we have seen precipitous rent growth really since 2010 across all multifamily communities. And we have this breadbasket of apartments. We actually built more apartments in 1972 in Charlotte per capita than we do today. And so we had a lot of deliveries of apartment communities in the 1970s and 80s. Those are in areas that are within usually 5 miles of uptown. They're in areas that are urbanizing, that are gentrifying. And so the opportunity for investors to go in and fix things up just a little bit and raise rents a lot has been, really one of the favorite investment classes of all real estate equity over the last decade. And it's put a lot of people in a tough spot. I mean, the displacement events we've seen in Charlotte, you can think about properties that used to exist that have been demolished for newer luxury housing, or even the ones that are less evident to your eyes. You drive by, you see a property that nobody knows, but if it changes ownership, the rents might have gone up on everybody by $500 a month. In an instant. And usually what that means is the people who've lived there for many, many years and built connections to that community are probably all gone within about an 18-month period. And so that really is the issue that we face. And it's very hard to define this number, but I've heard some smart people come into our market and say that we're losing about 3,000 units of this housing stock every year, either through rents going up a lot through these kind of value-add strategies, or the properties just getting demolished to the ground.
Can you talk just for a second about the cost of preserving an existing unit versus the cost of building a new unit of housing?
That is one of the things that we really rely upon in our model, and it makes the economics work more efficiently than new construction does, and allows all these principles we take from capitalism and the way that the market behaves, and we're able to do that and still create affordable outcomes. We're usually buying around 50 or 60% of replacement cost, or the cost to build properties from the ground up. And so that allows us to create a lot of efficiencies that makes this model work as really a private sector driven approach.
Okay. I'd love to get Nelson and Erskine to talk about this. You've got this concept of preserving NOAA, preserving naturally occurring affordable housing. How did you all get introduced to the idea of NOAA preservation, and where did the idea come from?
I'll take a crack at it.
Yeah, you've got the microphone, go for it.
I'd like to answer that question by saying thank you twice. First, I want to thank Chip, because when we were looking at this whole topic, we really weren't looking at NOAA's. I was looking at homelessness, and Erskine was looking at economic mobility. How do we lift people up in our society? We started doing some homework, and everywhere we went, they said, well, the precursor to homelessness is affordable housing or economic mobility. If you have affordable housing, that should follow. So we kept hearing affordable housing. And as we did, we said, we don't know anything about affordable housing. So I went to Chip and I said, Liz Clayson Kelly is the other name we heard everywhere besides affordable housing. It was, you need to talk to Liz. I didn't know Liz. Went to Chip. Chip said, I'll set up a meeting. So about a month later, we had a meeting in his office, lasted an hour. Chip had to go elsewhere. Liz and I went out in the parking lot, talked for another hour. She invited us down to her office, which is at the men's shelter, and for about 4 hours on a whiteboard gave us the whole tutorial on affordable housing. As part of that, we discussed NOAA. And of all the things she discussed, the only thing I could figure that was simple enough for us to get our hands around was the NOAA concept. You've got an apartment community sitting there. It's older. You can define how much you need to fix it up, and we can define the cost to buy it and go from there. So that's how we kind of stumbled onto this concept, which we found was a very quick way to make an impact and a much more direct way, and also one that we had the least amount of government interference or cooperation, whatever you want to say. So thank you, Chip. My other thank to you, and Mark mentioned it, is to you all. You're going to hear this morning about our supportive services, which have really become the heart and soul of what we are doing. And Adelaide in particular is driving that effort. But your dollars are going directly into our community health worker at Shamrock Gardens, one of our communities. And the community health worker is like the quarterback or the traffic cop for these supportive services. We take a survey of our residents. We find out what their needs are and what their wants are, what they would like to see added to their life. And then the community health worker marries that with the services that are available in the community. Some we get for free, others we have to pay for. And so we are continually raising money for those services, but the value they provide is unbelievable. And the fact that we are directly improving and changing people's lives through that effort is very, very gratifying. And so thank you all for your support of that in a very meaningful monetary way, because it will allow us to do some great things.
Erskine, maybe talk about what the Housing Impact Fund is. This is a relatively new thing. It's like that conversation with Chip was not long ago. And talk about what the Housing Impact Fund actually is.
It's a virtual company to begin with, and as Nelson said, thank you. You're looking at all of the employees of the Housing Impact Fund right now.
And only 2 of them get paid.
Right. And they're not sitting on this side of it now. I've worked with Nelson forever, and he's like the best human being I've ever known. Nelson taught me so many things. When I was selling businesses, I'd try to get the highest price, and when I was buying them, I'd try to pay the lowest price. And Nelson believes that everybody should win. He's the only person I've ever known in my life who puts you first in everything he does. And therefore, when we were retiring and he was thinking about what's next, I wanted to tag along. And that's what I did. Nelson really was. He was focused on the homeless situation. And you all probably remember the Raj Chetty study that showed Charlotte came in 50 of the 50 largest cities in the country in economic mobility. And I know that surprised a lot of my friends in the white community, but it didn't surprise anybody in the black and brown community. And So I really wanted to try to see if I could do something about that. So as Nelson said, we looked around and we stumbled across, thanks to Liz, this NOAA concept. And it just intuitively made sense to me, because it's almost impossible to buy the land and build something from the ground up and turn around and rent it to somebody at 30% of AMI at a price they can afford. And so Nelson and I had been figuring out ways to try to make things that look hard to make affordable, to make them affordable. And so we did a lot of study, we did a lot of homework, and we came across this NOAA concept. And Liz told us there was this bright young guy here in Charlotte, and that, he'd actually done a NOAA. So we went to see him, and the big problem that Mark had was he couldn't make a money good offer on the apartments he was trying to buy. And he would get outbid by a private equity group. And generally, when that private equity group would buy the company, buy the apartments, they would fix it up a little bit because they weren't going to own it for a very long period of time. And they'd raise the rents 50 to 100%. And all the people that lived there had to move out. And what really bothered us was all the kids that lived there had to go find a new school. And that meant they got in that total downward spiral of no continuity of education. And we really, Nelson has said so many times to me, he's never had a bigger passion for anything else he's done in his life. And I feel that too. And I sent Doug a note when we were talking about this, and I said, Doug, every time I think about what we're doing with the Housing Impact Fund, I think about something that Frank Vest said here at Christ Church at one of the few Sunday services I actually went to. And he said, it was a time when we were raising money to do good things in Charlotte. And Frank looked out at the congregation and he said, I wish I could get your hand to follow the capital that you're contributing here. And that stuck with me all these years, because this is the perfect example of that happening. If we can get you all in this room to go look at these apartments that we have bought and meet the people that live there and the social services that we're providing them right there where they are, I think it will knock you over about the difference we're making in their lives. We really had 3 pillars when we set out. One pillar was to provide, people who didn't have much money, to provide them an opportunity to live in a quality place to live. And we wanted that place to be near jobs, near transportation, near food, and hopefully in an area that was zoned for good schools. And that's what we've been able to do. We have about 1,800 apartments that we've been able to buy in the last 2 years. And so we provide them a quality place to live. We bring these social services to them, and I hope you're going to describe the social service because it will make an enormous difference in their lives. And the third leg of the stool was, we went to see the mayor when we were looking for additional money to have a capital stack that would enable us to rent at a very low rate. And we talked to her about using minority contractors to create some wealth in the minority community and give people a chance to move, not just in, but up. And we told her that we wanted to use all minority contractors to create jobs and wealth in that community. And she looked at us like, I don't really believe you. And because lots of people had told her they were going to do that and we turned around not being able to do it. And I had seen in Greensboro at UNCG, and we had encouraged using minority contractors, and they were using about 20%. But right next door at A&T, they were using almost 75% minority contractors. And we've been able to use 95% minority contractors, and we created some great jobs. The capital stack we have enables us to rent to people at 30% of AMI. And we also had a little problem, and that was with, being able to do that. And what we figured out was that if we did it on a for-profit basis, we'd have a little problem that the arithmetic didn't work. So we went to the city and county, and we told them, we can do this on a not-for-profit basis, and therefore we won't pay any property taxes, or we can do it on a for-profit basis, and where we'll have to pay it. And so what we want you to do is to allow us to do it on a for-profit basis, because that'll bring the discipline to the organization that you need to make it really work. And I told them, I know Dickie Babcock will appreciate this better than anyone. I said, I've spent my whole life in the capital markets, and everybody thinks because I'm a Democrat, I'm a socialist. And I said, I'm damn tired of being called a socialist. I believe in the capital markets, but I also believe if the capital markets are going to survive, they've got to work for more people, a lot more people. And by using all these minority contractors, we feel like we're able to do that. But we can. Go ahead.
Talk about this. You mentioned the 1,800 units you've acquired so far. Talk about the scale, the size of what you've raised, and how you've got started with it.
All right, I'll do that quickly, and then I'm going to bring it back to a point that Erskine made. We've raised two funds. Since we went to the for-profit model, we emulated what we had done at Carousel. Our first fund was $57 million, and the second fund was $68 million. So we've raised $125 million. We have reserved about 10 to 15% of that for future unknowns or renovations or whatever. But we have invested fully in our first fund. Our second fund is about half invested, or 2/3 will be when we complete these acquisitions. So the scale, these tend to be expensive, millions of dollars to buy a community, even though it was built in the 70s or the 80s, because of the ability to either tear it down and build something else there, or improve it and raise the rent so much. Liz told us when we were starting out, she said, the better Charlotte does as a community, the worse it is for us, for the homeless people. It creates more homeless situations. It creates more housing vulnerability. We found in trying to make acquisitions that oftentimes we would be beaten in the process, and we'd lose. As Erskine said, all the people in those apartments would be gentrified, moved out. They'd raise the rents 25 to 50%.
Had nowhere to go.
Yeah, and so they're living out of their cars. They're homeless, and that's what creates this terrible cycle. So I want to just give you a quick example that drives this home. Our first acquisition was an apartment community called Lake Mist, which is located down on Arrowwood Road, right on the light rail, South Boulevard. It's really been a great community for us. About 6 months in, we had a woman come to the office who was a resident, a legacy resident. She was there before we bought. And she said, I really like it here. You all are great. You've cleaned it up and everything, but I'm paying $900 a month in rent, which was the original rent that she paid. And she said, I'm making $1,100 a month. So gets me a little emotional. She's got take home at $200 a month. So through this program that Mark devised with the city and the county to use, in essence, a voucher that would rebate us money, we were able to reduce her rent to $375 a month. which means her take home suddenly went to about $600 a month. We dramatically changed her quality of living, and that's one of hundreds of stories that we could tell. So it's the power of this system that we were lucky enough to help create, but it does very dramatic.
Talk for a second about the $125 million that you've raised came from somewhere. Talk about just generally who your investors are and what's your, this is a for-profit investment that you're pitching to people.
Right.
So talk about
It's
that.
for profit, but it's less profit. So it's called social impact investing. And but we went out. It was the beginning of COVID. We said, well, we told Mark we were going to raise a fund, so we better go do it. The first thing we had to learn was to use Zoom. And that took us a couple of months to get that down. But once we got that down, things kind of proceeded better than we expected. We went to both the individuals and corporations and foundations. Truist Bank has been unbelievable. They stepped up right away. Our original goal was $30 million. They committed to raise, to contribute half of that. Atrium likewise has been not so much the extent of the money, but the kind of involvement. All these community health workers that we now have are Atrium employees, and Atrium subsidizes them. So it's, can't say we couldn't have done anywhere near what we've done without Atrium. And then quite a few other financial institutions. PNC Bank has been a big contributor, Barings, Ally, some foundations. The Levine Foundation was particularly generous. Duke Energy, Duke Endowment. So we have a very good sampling of community-minded corporations and foundations. And then the rest, frankly, are, I see several people in this room, individuals or family offices. And they have been very generous in putting their own money out to help support our cause. And I'll say that in the beginning, we had about a 6-page pamphlet and a concept that we had no proof of concept. And so we went to people, it was, trust us, we think this is a good idea, and we will give you a decent return. Our returns are projected to be an 8% IRR over a 20-year period. That 20 years is very long for any kind of an investment like this. So we were nervous that would people accept that. And they, I think, in the end, felt that the value being created was worth the inconvenience of the length of time to have your money tied up. We also do a cash-on-cash return, and we're already returning on their investment to the tune of our goal is a 6% cash-on-cash return. So at the end of 20 years, people, our investors, should get their money back, earn an 8% return, and then we have a waterfall that once that has happened, then the money goes, Mark's firm deservedly gets some money, but 60% of the remainder goes back into affordable housing. So we keep a mechanism where this keeps revolving back into affordable housing. Now, 20 years from now, Erskine and I may not be around to have an influence on that, but Mark and Adelaide certainly will. So we feel comfortable that we'll keep going in the right direction.
Mark, let's talk about how you've put those funds to use? And you've talked about acquiring. We've got on the screen some of the, it's a little bit hard to see from this distance, but the projects that you've acquired just in a couple of years. Talk about the competition that you faced, how you identify properties, and are there more out there?
There's probably no worse time to start an initiative to buy apartments in Charlotte than 2020, with interest rates at 3%. And, I mean, really, apartments, especially, those in big Sunbelt cities and especially in Charlotte, have been the darling of all kind of real estate investing over the last decade. And so we had to work hard. Nobody sells to us at a discount. Nobody sells to us because they like their mission. Everybody wants us to pay them the most money. And so we have to be able to do that. The beauty of it, though, is because we have this cost of capital from our fund, because we've had these strong partnerships with the city of Charlotte and their housing trust fund, because we've even got Mecklenburg County involved as a low-cost lender in a couple instances. We've created, a capital stack that is built to compete. It's built not to just get second place. It's built to actually get the deal done so we can start helping people. And so 2020, 2021, we had to be very creative. We bought more from moms and pops. We bought more stuff that was off market. We bought things that were the culmination of 5 years of conversations that I've been having with some folks. And then 2022, as interest rates moved up, we've seen it's competitive out there. There's a lot of competition. There's still a great opportunity for people to raise rents. It seems like there's kind of no end in sight just because we've got, too few apartments trying to house too many people, but it's gotten a little bit easier. And I never thought we'd be able to buy a deal that was broadly marketed, with a 70-page PDF that everybody in North America gets to see. But we're winning a lot of those deals. I think we've won all the deals we've really went after and bid on since 2022. And our weighted cost of capital works really well in this environment. And so we've been able to get some newer properties, been able to get some. If you look at our Fund 2 portfolio, it's all in South Charlotte. So we're getting in neighborhoods that we didn't think we probably would have touched back in 2020. School districts, we're getting in places that, really don't have a lot of deferred maintenance. They look great. And, we like the fact that their values have come down by about 30% since that peak in 2021. On a long-term, that basis we think is going to be good for us and our investors and gives us a lot of optionality down the road. And so it's been a really interesting process because a lot has changed, even just the 4 years we've been doing this.
So when you buy a project, what does it look like to a resident? If you're a resident experiencing the change of ownership to the Housing Impact Fund and Ascent, what happens?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Talk about that.
There's usually a little bit of triage, right? Like we find things in our due diligence that, are really abhorrent in a couple instances about, conditions that folks are living in because of landlord negligence. Not all properties like that. There are some, great market rate operators out there that we've been able to purchase from, but we've seen some things that we've literally day one, gone in and started renovating units to get people's quality of life back up. I think, sometimes it takes a little bit of time for them to understand really what's happening. But I'll tell you when it really hits them is when their lease comes up for renewal. Because the market's out there churning. The real big displacement event happens when that property trades hands. That's when you get the person that's owned it for a while, didn't really care to push rents that aggressively, and somebody comes in, pays a really high price for it, and the only way to rationalize that investment is to shoot the rents up as fast as they can. But there's also there's kind of a slow death too. And that's, the market has been doing, we buy properties and we hear they're doing, $150 to $300 a month increases every year on these renewals. And so when a resident walks in, when their 12-month lease expires, that's what they're embracing to hit. We buy the property, they come up for a lease renewal, it's welcome news. If their rent's already higher than where our new residents are gonna be living, it's gonna be flat, it's frozen. The rent's not gonna change at all. If it's at a place that's consistent with everything else, we're usually somewhere between a 2 and a 3% renewal increase, something around like $15 or $20. If we learn, like Nelson mentioned, that someone is paying too much of their income towards housing, we are qualifying people into some of the programs we have to bring their rents down. And so there's been a couple, maybe 3 dozen instances that are exactly like the story that Nelson told about the woman at Lake Mist, where somebody signed a lease along, years ago. Their life has changed to a point where they might be on SSDI or some other form of fixed income only. or their employment has changed, or something in their family composition has changed their income, yet their rent has remained the same. And they've been paying a disproportionate amount, 50, 60, 70, 80% of their income to make ends meet because there's no better option for them. And then we're able to change that equation. And I think those to me are really, what feels amazing. And what I think, one of the big kind of facets of preserving nationally according affordable housing is keeping folks in place, preventing displacement. On the other side, when people do move out because they find a new job, they move town, they form a new family, what have you, we're moving folks in that are the most vulnerable, in our community. I mean, 30% of our units are that come available go to 30% households earning 30% AMI and below. That's a person who makes $22,000 a year or less. It's a family of four who makes $30,000 a year or less. Their incomes often aren't even what market rents are on a monthly basis. And so having those opportunities to serve, there's about 29,000 households like that out there that really face no good consequences. Being able to move them in, especially in neighborhoods of opportunity like this, I think is just amazing. And that the program we created with the county and the city to turn the taxes into rental subsidies and make those numbers work, I think really is my favorite part about this work, and something that with now about 150 households in just the last 24 months, we've really have started changing lives.
You're making the dollars work twice, right? Mm-hmm. You're paying property tax and it's coming right back to the property, in the form of vouchers, which is a pretty incredible political accomplishment.
I want to get to Adelaide.
We're going to do that. I'm almost.
She's got the real story.
Don't worry, I'm almost there. I promise. Just to put one point on it, Mark. Give us some numbers to compare, like average rents in your properties with average rents and median rents in Charlotte. Just put some give us some data on that, and then we'll get to Adelaide.
Sure.
Use 30% of AMIs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have one single, individuals who make, 15% of AMI. They're paying in the 200s. 15% of AMI. Yeah, $11,000. Yeah, about $11,000 a year in income. And so, we, in a lot of cases, that's someone like I've seen people who've worked their entire life and then they get a cancer diagnosis, and now they're limited to disability income or things of that nature. And so people who've worked hard their entire years now, and now their life has changed, and to avoid, they're getting evicted from their current place of residence. Now they need a place to live out their years to get better, to rehabilitate, to maybe live out their years of retirement, and that's happened in a lot of those cases. The range. Our market rents, I think our median rent in Charlotte for one bedroom is $1,460, and a median two bedroom rent's like just over $1,700 a month. Here's something I learned last night, because we were debating what bullet points to put on. The beauty of this partnership is we're very passionate, and there's a lot of very good ideas, and so there's a lot of emails that happen. Preparing a response to Nelson last night, you know what I saw in a new market report was that if you looked at this distribution of apartment rents in Mecklenburg County, the lowest 1% is around $900 to $1,000 a month. There is nothing below $900 a month in rent anymore. And it was not that way a decade ago. You could have gone anywhere, we both live in Plaza Midwood, you could have gone anywhere within a half mile of our houses, and you would have found apartments renting in $600, $700, $800 a month. That's where most of our immigrant community lives. That's where our refugees live. That's where folks on a fixed income live. It's gone. That whole floor has moved up. And so the average rent across our entire portfolio, if you look at 30, which are down in that $200, $300, $400 a month range, 60% AMI, 80% AMI, the average rent in Housing Impact Fund right now is somewhere around $950 a month. Compared that to that median rent, which is, if you blend one and twos, is around $1,600. So we're just about a little over half of the average rent in Charlotte at our properties.
And so just think, somebody's paying $900 a month for a horrible place to live. And we're paying, at our place, we're paying about $350 a month for a quality place to live. That's why I want you to go see these. They're places where you'd be happy for your kids to live. I mean, they really are quality places to live after we've done the renovation of them. And they're going to stay quality because we're not dating these apartments. We are marrying them for 20 years.
All right, give the mic to Adelaide. Adelaide, your job is overseeing operations at all these complexes. How are you delivering supportive services in these communities? Talk about that to us.
We can go to the next slide, and
okay.
there we go. Yeah, so our wraparound services, our supportive services model, and as Erskine said, that's one of our key pillars of Housing Impact Fund, is not only to move people in, provide quality homes with affordable rents, but also to provide opportunities so that they can become more upwardly mobile and access resources and services they otherwise wouldn't have had access to. So it's really centered around this partnership with Atrium, one of our investors, and they have been an amazing partner. As an investor, they've actually decided to forgive their 6% cash-on-cash returns to fund community health workers. And Atrium is one of a number of providers across the country that manages and has a network of community health workers. And despite the name community health, it's really an individual who's accredited and available to solve the social determinants of health, which really covers everything from financial stability, education, health, and just a network of resources. So we've been fortunate with this partnership to embed a community health worker at each of the properties we acquire.
On site.
On site. So they're available to residents 5 days a week. We take a communal space and kind of outfit them with an office and a space for residents to gather. And if that communal space doesn't already exist at the property, we will take an apartment unit and convert it. And they're kind of the number one person on the ground. And prior to that, we have our community managers, which are our leasing office. And Carla, you want to stand up? Yeah. Carla should be the one up here as well as Elia. They really fill this role too and help become that trusted person on the ground that is there to, like as Mark said, a lot of the properties we acquire, residents are used to absent landlords or neglectful landlords, and that sense of trust and among the office and the residents is not there, and then the trust amongst the community isn't there. So the key premise around the community health worker is to build that trust, whether it's through community events, providing one-on-one counseling, and connecting the folks to different services.
And this is not something that happens at the snap of a finger. It takes time,
yeah.
I take it.
It takes time. So after we acquire a property, it's typically a lot of energy going into renovations. And then from there, once we have reached a point of stability, we then bring in a community health worker. And as Atrium's investment funds a good number of community health workers. And then earlier this year, we realized that we want to accelerate the number of community health workers available. We're not able to do the programming and provide the services we'd like to provide without that individual who's on the ground. And that's when Christchurch actually was the first to step up in a major way and funded a multi-year grant to fund a community health worker at one of our properties on the east side near Plaza Midwood called Shamrock Gardens. And we hired Elia, who I think is here somewhere.
Over there.
Okay.
Yeah, stand up,
There's
Elia.
Let me
Elia
recognize
Campazano.
Elia.
Yeah.
Thank you to you all for making Elia's position possible. Elia joined us this summer. And I can get into
Just to put a point on it, this is some of the first dollars that we have committed from the Transforming Hearts campaign. We've made a 5-year commitment to fund Elia's position, the community health worker at Shamrock Gardens, which we're very excited about and very, very proud of. Elia is an employee of Atrium. She works for Atrium. A lot of this story is about partnerships. You've got the county in partnership with the Housing Impact Fund. You've got Atrium in partnership with Housing Impact Fund. There's a real web that these guys have created to make it work. Adelaide, you know these communities better. Talk about Shamrock Gardens. It's located, if you're going out Eastway, I had the map up, but you're going out Eastway, it's right before you get to Garinger, on the right, just past Shamrock.
Less than a block from Lang Van.
Yeah, right. That's right. Everybody knows that. So it's on out there. It's a great community. Talk about the turnover rate. Talk about the occupancy rate. It's a really interesting story at Shamrock.
I'll let Mark spit out the facts because he is just an encyclopedia of facts. But Yeah, we acquired Shamrock Gardens, and it is, you'd probably call it our baby, because it had required, our oldest property. It was built in the 60s, and it's this
How
amazing.
big is it? 265?
265 apartments, and it's garden style for the most part. So there's a large acreage, a lot of land, and these older apartments that required a lot of renovation that Carla and Mark survived, and there's very low turnover here because some folks moved in. I think our oldest resident right now moved in the 70s, so it's been there for 50 years. And when you move in that early on, your rents are low. So we have a lot of older senior citizens who moved in at these low rents and have no reason to leave, which is amazing. So we are able to keep rents relatively low. But the makeup it's a mix. It's probably 80% Spanish speaking as the primary language, majority first and second generation immigrants, and we have a mix of senior citizens, but also families with young children. We have a lot of kids running around the property, so it's pretty exciting to see when the bus rolls up. But there's also multi-generations, so we have some grandparents living a few doors down from their grandkids and their kids. And within Shamrock, we own 2 properties that are nearby on the east side. It can be very different. You see huge differences between each of those communities in the makeup, the demographics, and both the physical structure of the properties. And then within the property, we serve individuals who are earning up to 80% of AMI, which is around $60,000 a year. So it could be the teachers employed at CMS or healthcare workers. We have a program through this subsidy program of 18 to 22-year-olds who are moving out of foster care. So they are just leaving the system, are finishing out their GEDs, and have zero income. So there's a range both within the properties as well.
Talk a little bit about how, well, first of all, the surveys. Nelson mentioned it very briefly in passing. How you evaluate the community before you don't tell the community what to do. You respond to what the community needs.
Yeah,
Talk about that.
That's a big part of it, is just understanding. We can look at our rent roll and look at some of the stats and understand general demographics, but until we have someone like Elia on site who can do household surveys and understand what are the unique needs that every different family is facing, and how old are their kids, are they facing more transportation barriers or child care barriers, that until we have that data, we aren't able to appropriately customize the services and find the right nonprofit partners to serve there. So when Elia joined, we had a community event, and we had dozens of people sign up to meet with Elia and say, I want to meet with Elia, I want to fill out a survey, I want to connect with resources and support. And Carla, since we acquired the property, had been filling in, on top of her running the property job was doing this. So having an extra set of resources has been huge.
I think there's a hope here, at least among the folks who've been involved so far, that Christ Church can be involved in this community in an appropriate way. This needs to be driven by this community. But what we're hoping is that Elia will be a conduit for ways that we might be able to be supportive in this community. Halloween was a big day over there. There was a big Halloween sort of trunk or treat gathering at Shamrock Gardens. But maybe there are ways for us to be involved. Do you want to speak to that, Adelaide, just a little bit?
Yeah. So once can we have this insight into what some of the needs are and what are the different barriers folks are facing, we are working to build out nonprofit partnerships. So we're bringing programs on site to the community, to these communal spaces, that whether it's one property we have every Saturday, we have tutors. CMS teachers come to tutor kids who need out-of-school enrichment, or summer camps, or we have Commonwealth Charlotte, who I think was here last week at the Faith Forum, providing financial counseling and empowerment. So our goal is to connect with organizations, to bring those services on site. So one aspect is making those connections. And your team has already actually been helpful in introducing Elia and our team to different programs out there. And the other is helping us kind of build out the sense of community. We have quarterly or more often kind of block party style events and smaller scale ones that just get everyone together. And the Halloween was a big trunk or treat. We had a bunch of volunteers out with what it looked like in the Christchurch parking lot too. Another example is we have a big community gardening day last spring, and provided seeds and plantings for everyone, and the community jumped on it. So there's different
Tree
types
Charlotte was involved in that.
Yes, yeah, and then Tree Charlotte came out and did a big tree planting to increase the tree coverage. So there's a range from either volunteer activities like that or donation drives. I think Ellie would probably like me to shout out that we have we're going to have a coat drive and do a coat distribution in mid-December. So any types of support in that range would be.
The message there is stay tuned, everybody. You're going to hear from Laura and Joan.
Let me just read, because I read this to Jane Schwab coming over here, and she just, if you get a feel for what you are making possible for these people to improve their lives, it's not just education. It's the kind of education. It's what they said they needed. It's tutoring. It's school supplies. It's home libraries. It's a summer camp. It's for teachers. We're providing free housing if they'll live there, and provide individual tutoring to the kids that live there and to the adults. Under the health and nutrition area, it's early childhood development. It's preventive health care services. It's social, emotional, and mental wellness programs. It's free produce, so they eat better. Under workforce development and financial wellness, we're providing employment and training, financial education, budgeting. It's just, it is amazing what the people are able to learn. And when they learn these and get these skills and these opportunities, they can move up and move out, and hopefully to their own home at some point in time, because they are saving money by living with us.
Just real quick, you can tell our passion, but we don't wear watches, so
I can see one.
It's up to you. Keep track of the time. You mentioned ways to get involved. At one of our communities, Lake Mist, Lending Tree has adopted that community as their own, and they provide all kinds of events that are staffed by their employees. And so we would welcome the idea of Christchurch adopting one of our communities and figuring out ways to get more engaged. Finally, in the circle of life category, as we look at Shamrock, we were talking with one of our investors not long ago, and he said, when I moved to Charlotte, I had no money, and he and his wife lived at Shamrock. And now he's an investor in our fund that is doing great things, giving back to the community. So that's a nice feeling.
Yeah. Nelson, speak to what you think the next 5 years looks like. First of all, is there going to be a Housing Impact Fund 3 or 4 or 5? Or?
I don't buy green bananas, so 5 years maybe. Yeah. I would say that we see a bright future. We're continuing our investing paces faster than it's ever been. We definitely see a Fund 3, and that could be our swan song, but we are definitely gearing up for that, and that'll take place probably in the spring of next year.
Okay.
So.
Hand the thing to Mark for a second. Mark, you've been speaking around the country about this. Are other people doing this? Is this just a Charlotte thing, or is this happening anywhere else?
We took inspiration from a couple folks across the country, outfits in Minneapolis and Austin and DC, but not nearly enough. And those are still the names I referenced today, even after kind of 7 or 8 years of thinking about this. And I think, most cities have an affordable housing problem. Some consultant tells them that this naturally occurring affordable housing thing is something they should build a strategy on, and then the report gets published and nothing happens afterwards. And so I think, what is rare is what happened here. What's rare is that, the city was talking about NOAA in 2017. The city talked about NOAA when they increased their housing trust fund bond in 2018. No one was going to use it. We're still going to do the same old stuff, and we're still going to lose thousands of these units every single year. And they really weren't going to find any way for anyone to put the stewardship of these older properties that have vulnerable residents that continue to house low and moderate income households. It was never going to happen, except for the fact that they made this pledge to each other in college about doing something when they retired to benefit the community. And decided to come to our office 4 days before the pandemic started on March 15th, 2020. And the fact that I would, respond to like the 10 dozen emails of questions that Erskine wrote me over the next 2 months. And so, I mean, that is what's remarkable about this. I think any community can do it. There's generous people. There's places where you find this money. There's the inventory's there. But I will say, it's amazing. What has taken place because of their leadership.
Folks, that's a Housing Impact Fund. Thank you to all of you. Let's pray before we go. Loving and gracious God, in this season of Thanksgiving, we thank you for gathering us today to reflect on the vital need for affordable housing in our community. We are deeply grateful for these leaders who shared their wisdom and vision with us. Bless their dedication, their courage, and their tireless efforts to bring hope and stability to those in need. May their work inspire us to be agents of change, seekers of justice, and offerers of compassion. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Thanks, everyone. Well done, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Please go. Please go.
Thank you.
Good.